We're hacking assessment again today. So the first question, I will start this agenda coming up. Jamie had asked was about her ninth grade class, and she was saying that the standards for ninth grade English are 9, 10. And when we think in terms of standards where there are bands and students have time to really master what it's supposed to look like by the end of the bands, and if you're in New York now, even with the Next Gen Learning Standards, the bands are a little broader than they were before, especially at the younger age levels. What I would really recommend doing is building progressions, where if we know that the end mark is the 10th grade of the standard, what could and should it look like in ninth grade so that kids have that language? You might even co-construct it with kids saying, all right, if the Common Core standard is a 9, 10 standard and we have to have this mastered by the end of 10th grade, what's appropriate for the end of ninth grade? Always keeping in mind too that there are going to be some students who are already at the end of 10th grade and probably maybe even into the 11th and 12th grade. And on the flip side of that, you probably have students too that are going to be lower than the ninth grade as well. So when you're building those progressions, you might want to dig a little deeper into the 7th and 8th grade standards as well, and then the 11 and 12, so that when you're looking at a particular progression, you look at how the complexity of the standard builds over time. And then that could also give you some good benchmarks. And I know, Jamie, you're just starting out as a teacher. You're in a couple of years at this point. The best thing you could start doing is start collecting student work that you think is exemplary. I know you're working on your own, which is always hard. That's how I did it also. A lot of my colleagues just weren't doing the same thing that I was doing. But we did have a vertical articulation in our department where we knew what 12th grade graduation criteria was and then kind of worked our way backward from there about the skills and standards we wanted kids to be mastering at each level as they work their way up to 12th grade. Did it happen the way we wanted it to all the time? Not so much, but we did try in earnest to make it so. And for some, it was easier than others. And again, it's always hard because, especially in high school, you don't know how much they retained from middle school. Middle school teachers work so hard, and it's not their fault if they come to us in ninth grade not ready. It's not like the middle school teachers didn't do their job. I think that there's just a gap sometimes when you go from middle to high, just like in kindergarten, the loss of reading skills by the time they get to first grade is also a bit of a slide. And I think that's very typical. So just being prepared, knowing that you might have kids that are below the ninth grade standard and also kids who are on the other end, and then building out that progression of any one particular standard. So you'll figure out your power standards. You'll kind of look at the language, how they progress. With the Common Core, I know that from 9th to 12th, sometimes it's as much as like a phrase or an adjective that kind of comes in that adds things. Like once you get to 8th grade, a lot of the standards kind of stay the same, but just progress a little bit at a time. And then thinking about the collection of the very specific examples of student work. So if you are working on argument writing, for example, and obviously there are a lot of standards with the argument writing that are subsets of that. If you have student work that exemplifies what you think mastery looks like, and then you put it before your students, and we talk about, what makes this work according to the standard, and then start building a library so that next year you could use that, with the student's permission, of course, use the student work as the example for different parts of the progression. This is what a solid 8th grade example looks like. This is what a solid 9th grade example looks like. This is what a solid 10th grade one is. And, I don't want to jump in too much to the next question yet, but obviously they might be stronger in one area than another area. And that's something you need to think about too, about, you know, what does a masterful argument paper look like? Does everything have to be on the exemplary side? Or can there be some areas that are proficient while other areas are super strong? That really depends on what you're teaching them and what the expectations are. And if you're not working with other teachers, it's going to be up to you to really make that decision. So good morning to everyone who's joined us. Matt and Brian, love to see you guys back. And Megan, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Does anybody have questions about standards progressions before we get into the next topic? How do all of you combat the standards bands? If you're in the lower level of a 2-year standard, how do you know kids have mastered what they're supposed to master by the end of ninth grade if the standard itself doesn't complete until 11th grade? So that's 10th grade rather. That's what we're talking about right now. Oh, it's my pleasure. Is that Jamie on there right now? I'm so glad that you did look at the progression for 11th and 12th. It's a really good idea, again. And the Core Collaborative, if you go on their website, they do have a protocol for unpacking standards, which is a really great way to dig deeply into the standards once you've decided which one you're going to use. And it's a super... the format is really, really awesome, and you could break it down. And then once you kind of break down the library and you keep them, you save them digitally, then you have everything broken down, and you could really build those progressions based on the verbs and the nouns that you notice in each standard. So I'm going to highly recommend it. We have them for free, I believe, on our website. That you could just download them.
Yeah, I'm putting in the link right now.
If you want to try out that protocol.